Hey, good day, everybody. Sorry we're a couple of minutes late here. This is Dave Walker with the B to SMB Institute, and welcome to Small Biz Aid Live, our Track 2 session number 2 in Track 2 this afternoon. I'm going to be your quote moderator today, not really a moderator, just simply someone who gets to introduce two absolutely fantastic speakers here who are going to talk about getting your first website right. And just quick story, my first website, I spent $110,000 and it didn't go very well at all. So I would just like to say, boy, can you blow a lot of money on your first website, and I certainly did. Please use our sessions Q&A to ask your questions. I know the temptation is to lob it into the live chat. We'll certainly monitor live chat to see your questions, but it's much easier for our presenters and our moderators to really direct your questions when it's in Q&A. And then please join our alignable small business groups at the end of this session if you want to continue this dialogue with your peers and with other experts. Links to these groups will be provided in chat really throughout the session, but particularly at the end. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Stony DeGuyter and Kirch McConlug. And we're going to start first with you, Stony, and really what you're going to talk about is kind of the checklist that you need to go through to really build your first and powerful website.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody. So I can't see anything other than my presentation, so if you're sending questions, I can't see any of those. So I guess we'll hold those till the end, and hopefully between Kirsch and I, we'll save a little bit of time for Q&A.
Yeah, and we'll feed you questions throughout. If really it seems like an important question that you need to answer, we'll dump in.
That sounds great. All right, so I have a presentation called Build a Powerful Website that outsmarts, outperforms, outlasts the ever-changing digital landscape. But this is not that presentation because we're here to talk about getting your first website right. So we're going to take a couple steps back a little bit. And I'm going to give you what I'm calling the best damn first website checklist, period. And I'm hoping it lives up to that. But if not, the fault is mine. So let's kind of get going here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Stony DeGuyter. I'm a 20-year digital marketing veteran. I owned my own agency for 20 years, and now I am Director of Digital Marketing at Socket Mobile. If you want to connect with me and follow me, you can do that on Twitter, LinkedIn, and my website. Mostly those places are just my playground. But I also wrote a couple books, Best Damn Web Marketing Checklist Period, and the other one, which has a title too long to mention. I tried to get it longer, but I was unable to do so. But you can read those books. They're great checklists, and I pulled a little bit of information from those for this presentation, plus some new stuff. So what you got to know is the web is a very, very, very busy place. There is a lot of stuff going on all the flipping time. And because of that, everyone is fighting for attention. You are competing against two cats fighting that everybody's scrolling through on social media and all that stuff people are doing on TikTok and Twitter and everything else, and you're fighting just to get eyeballs on your site. And that makes it hard to do. So in order to capture people's attention, your website has to do a few things. First, you have to be able to establish your brand, who you are. You got to communicate your value. You got to create a compelling experience. And finally, you have to get results. So we're going to walk through some of this, and I'm going to give you a few quick things to be able to follow through on your website. But just know that this is scratching the surface here. So let's talk about establishing your brand and how to do that. First thing you think about is, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And there's a lot of voids out there. And whether you already have your business or you don't, there's something in that business that isn't going on, or there's something not being filled. I don't know if you guys remember the waffle taco. I had no idea this void was in my life, but Taco Bell did. And they figured it out, and they started this waffle taco. And I absolutely love it. They don't do it anymore because really what this started filling another void that Taco Bell had, which was breakfast. They did not do breakfast until the waffle taco, and now they have a whole breakfast menu, which sadly does not include the waffle taco. But what they did is they saw this void in the market, and a way that they and they alone can fill it, because there's not that many taco places doing breakfast out there. And they do it quite well. You want to find, or you want to uncover a want and then deliver it. And this is a great little story. The Prego and Ragu, the two major spaghetti sauces out there. Well, Ragu was the market. They owned it. And Prego's going, hey, you know what can we do and give people what they want? What is it that they want? So they did a survey, and they found out that people wanted regular, a third of people wanted spicy, and a third of people wanted chunky spaghetti sauces, and these things did not exist, the spicy and the chunky. So Prego developed a chunky spaghetti sauce, and with that move, uncovering that want, they took over the market. They became the #1 spaghetti sauce. All just because they did a survey to find out what it was that people actually wanted. And then you want to be able to see problems and solve them. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, that show is basically people who have seen problems and find a way to solve that problem. You don't like scooping kitty litter out of the kitty litter bin? Well, they've got a solution for that. You want to bring your guitar on the plane? Well, they've got a solution for that. This is a great show just to help even get the mind juices flowing and figuring out how to solve problems. What are problems that people are seeing and how to solve them? And you can do that within your industry, with your product, with your service. What are the problems that you can solve that nobody else is solving right now? And you don't want to try to be all things to all people. Pontiac tried to do that. They used to be, this muscle car. They were known for their muscle cars. And then they said, hey, you know what? Let's expand our audience a little bit and let's start making these sedans and minivans. And sure enough, what happened to Pontiac? They pretty much disappeared. They tried to do too much. They went outside of their lane. So let's talk about 2 very easy ways you can establish your brand with your first website. Like I said, scratching the surface here. But the first thing you can do is just make sure you've got the right domain name. You want to have your own website. You want to have your own domain that's yours. It's not a shared domain. You want something short, memorable, and if it can describe what you do and keeping it short and memorable, you want to do that. But the main thing is memorable where somebody can type it in. I've seen a lot of domain names where people spell things really weird, and you wouldn't know how to get there if you tried. And I guess that's what Google's for. But you don't want to force people to Google your domain name. The second thing you can do is really kind of figure out what your voice is. Are you going to be humorous? Are you going to be serious? You can be snarky, down to earth, whatever that is, whatever you want your voice to be, you want to utilize that throughout your website. Every word should flow through that voice, and that really helps establish who you are. And a lot of companies have done a great job establishing their brand through their voice. And people just they fell in love with that voice, and that website became a person. It became a character for them. So that's something that you can do as well. Moving on to communicate your value. That's something, everybody's got something worth sharing. They've got something that they do and they do well, and you've got to be able to communicate that. What do these companies have in common? They've all done a pretty good job of communicating their value. Netflix and AMC, they're streaming video providers, and they produce shows that you look at and go, oh yeah, I know those shows. I've seen those. Red Bull and Chipotle, you also know automatically what they do, but they communicated their value in a slightly different way than the other two. Where Chipotle, they created a 4-episode TV series called Farm to Dangerous, which was pretty funny, and it was very much on brand. It was very much, they didn't mention the name of Chipotle throughout, but it was very much about sustainable products, and it really resonated and it fit well. And Red Bull, they're the energy drink. Well, they speak to their audience with a magazine called the Red Bulletin. And this is a magazine for the type of people who drink Red Bull, who want to have that energy burst. So there's a lot of ways and a lot of options that you can step outside of what is considered the norm and do something different while still speaking your audience languages and communicating that value to them. And that's what you have to do. So you have to figure out what is the language your audience speaks. and learn to speak to that through that language, with that language. There's a lot of inside lingo that we often use in businesses, and you've got to get away from that inside lingo and talk about, your products and your services in a way that your customers actually understand it. So 3 easy ways to communicate your value. The first is content. Your content is going to go a long way in demonstrating, how you demonstrate your value. And now you can do that 2 ways. You can do mass content, which is just have a lot of content out there, and hopefully the search engines will find it. People come to your website. Or you can do focused content, authoritative content. And typically, if it's a battle between the two, well, only one of those wins. So you really want to think about, though, how you write your content and what kind of content you're going to write. The next thing you can do is optimization, and this isn't just search engine optimization, but user optimization and optimization of processes and information and all of that. And in the end, what you're doing is you're making your value easy to digest, easy to read, easy to find, and you just create that whole experience for the visitor. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit more here. And finally, blogging and social media. Those are opportunities to find out what your audience is interested in, and then add something new to that conversation, and then just be on the lookout for ways to engage with your audience, whether it be your visitors or the visitors that you want to your website, the people who would be interested in your products or services. You want to be engaging with them as often as you can, and doing so in a way that's adding value to them. And you become, you begin to demonstrate your value in that way, where you become a known entity, whether it's forums or social media or, even people coming to your blog, where they're coming back for that value that you offer. All right, so let's go on to create a compelling experience. I think I'm moving a little fast here, but I think that's going to be okay. More time for Kirsch. So creating a compelling experience. Don't make your audience think. I have a saying, I think I learned it from my dad. He said, you can't stop stupid, but you can slow it down a little bit, and that's what you want to do with creating a compelling experience. You have to make things easy for your visitor, because really people are dumb. I am the dumbest person on your website when I go to your website, and so you really have to try and cater to me and what I don't know. And that's one thing that we often forget is we know these things, we know how our website works, we know where all the information is, but your visitor doesn't. And we have to figure out ways how to make it easier for them. You don't want to make them think about where to go to find information. You want to put it right there in front of them. You want to, when you create a great experience, you increase your exposure. And no, sorry, that's the wrong kind of exposure here. So when you have a great experience, you increase, no, sorry, wrong exposure. There you go. Great experience, increased exposure. And this is what you want your website to feel like, an open door. You want it to feel like everybody's welcome. They're going to come. They're going to get the information they need. They're going to get the goods. And you're just welcoming them, and they have that place, kind of like if you remember the show Cheers from the 80s, where everybody knows your name, and you want people to feel that comfort level on your site, and you do that by creating those great experiences. So 4 quick ways to create a compelling experience. Hosting. You want to make sure you have the right hosting platform for your website. It doesn't have to break the bank. There are cheap hosting platforms out there, but also sometimes the cheap hosting platforms are very cheap hosting platforms, and they're not going to be sufficient. So you want to do your research. You want to make sure it's got all the things that you need, and you're not paying for the things that you don't. Web hosting can really make or break user experience. It can slow your site down. Outages can keep people from finding the site. So you really want to find a reputable company with that. Your content management system, this is how you edit your website, and you want to make sure you have a CMS that isn't just easy to use, it's easy for you to use. There's a lot of CMSs out there that are easy for developers. And you've got to find one that makes sense to you, and you're able to go in and make the edits that you need to make, because the last thing you want to do is be paying a web developer to make very simple edits that you otherwise could do. So again, do the research on the CMS. There's a lot of popular platforms out there. There's a lot of unpopular platforms out there, and you should know the difference and you should know why. But the CMS is designed to make your life easy, so make sure it does that. Your URLs, when you're naming pages in your CMS, you want to keep them short. You want to use categories and keywords as much as possible. And because the goal is you want somebody to be able to look at the URL and immediately know what content is going to be on that page. A lot of CMSs will add URLs that are very long and complicated and a lot of variables and things like that. You want to get away from that as much as possible. Make it easy, where if you handed something nothing but the URL, they could say yes or no, that's the site I want to go to. In search results, Google shows the URL, and there's a reason they do that, because people make decisions on what to click on. The URL is one of those things that gets processed to decide if that's a relevant page for the query. And your site needs to be mobile ready. We're in the age where mobile is the device that people are using more times than not. Now, this depends on industry a great deal, but even in very heavy desktop-friendly industries where more people are using the desktop, research is still being done in mobile in many times. People are doing searches, finding websites, and then they'll go back later on the desktop if they need to. So you want to make sure that that mobile experience is top-notch. All right, and finally, you want to get results. That is very important, that everything that you're doing is done so it gets resolved. Every website is nothing more than a leaky bucket, and your job is to plug those holes as much as possible. And those holes are, whether people are finding the information they want, whether they are able to contact you, what's your return policy, what are the things that make them comfortable, whether or not they know that what you're offering is the solution to their problem. So you need to make sure you have that information there so you can plug these holes and keep more people on the website and moving them through the conversion process till where they ultimately pick up the phone or fill out a form or whatever it is to engage with you as a company. So you're always filling those leaky bucket holes, because winning is the only result that matters, and not just you winning. As business owners, we want to win, but we also want to make sure our visitors feel like they are winning, because really that is the only way that you win, is when your visitors feel like they're winning. So you got to make sure that that's the result that you're really looking for. So 3 quick ways to get results. Analytics, make sure you have analytics installed and you're tracking data. That is what's going to tell you what is or isn't on your website. It's going to tell you what pages are more popular than others. It's going to tell you where people are leaving, where they shouldn't be, what keywords some people are coming in on. Maybe you get that data. So analytics, though, is very, very important. You want to make sure you have that, because that's going to tell you what's working and what's not. And you can take that information and then fix things that are broken and duplicate the things that are working in other areas. Make sure you're easy to contact. Until you're Amazon or Walmart, that's probably not a good example, because they often want you to call them, but Amazon definitely does not want you to call them. But until you're at that level, you want the phone calls, you want people to pick up the phone. And I know it can be, people are calling because, they just didn't see where that information was. It was on the website. It's really easy. But better to pick up the phone and tell them how to get the information than lose them altogether. So make sure you're easy to contact, easy to find, and all of that trust information is easy to get to, and you can convey that. And the last thing here is verify everything. What works today on your website doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. It's amazing how often things break and you don't even know it, especially your forums. Check for broken links, pages that may have accidentally got deleted or moved around and URLs changed. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with the website, and I recommend monthly checks for a lot of these little things. I run broken link checks through my websites once a month. We check our forms every month. These are all little things. They take time, but they're valuable. They can be very important to do because it can be one little thing, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, you know what? Nobody's ordered anything for 6 months. Well, that's because your form broke. So you want to make sure you stay on top of that stuff. So there's always room to improve. This is a checklist for your first website, and there's always going to be something more that you can do. So you want to keep establishing your brand. You don't do that once and say you're done. You keep doing that. You want to continue communicating your value in all the different ways that are available to you. You want to create more compelling experiences, and you always want to be analyzing your results, because this may be your first website, but if you start strong, you're going to level up pretty quick. And that's the goal, is to go from the starter website to that robust website that really truly gets the results and builds your business. That is my presentation. Thank you very much. I hope you guys learned something.
And Stony, I'll just jump in here with a quick question that comes from our audience. Holly asks, I was really told I needed a pixel on my site. What is that, and where do I find it?
They're probably referring to a tracking pixel for analytics purposes, and I don't know if that's necessarily a thing anymore. It's funny, I actually suggested this to my analytics guy. We're trying to solve a problem. I think you just need to have analytics installed, put analytics code into your website, and if you're using Google Analytics, they can tell you all about how to do that.
There is actually a great, I'll try and find the link for it. There's a great YouTube tutorial on how to apply Google Pixels to a site. So I will see if I can find that and embed it here in chat. Thank you, Holly. Great question. All right, Kirch, you're up. Kirch, you need to unmute your mic.
Stop sharing on mic. My mute is unmuted. Can you hear me now? Share the screen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, let me just tell you that in the last few minutes, while you were talking, almost all of my presentation evaporated. Almost all of it. So there's a big hunk in the middle where I just hope that I can say enough things to make sense. So there you go. Not my idea of a good time. Anyway, let me start here. I'm a freelancer. I build sites mainly for small businesses and a couple of nonprofits. And my biggest challenge after getting clients to bother to send me some content, period, is making the site as user-friendly as possible. Generally in my business, there's only one person on the client end who's paying any attention at all. And they have some idea about the way the site should work based on their own experience, but that's really not enough. So it's my responsibility to use the best practices and my knowledge of UX to encourage the right direction. And I got to have good reasons for doing what I've done, especially if only one or two people are going to look at the site. So the first thing I want to say, because this will be important, go to the next one here. Only 95% of people do not know how to use a computer, do not use the web right. So what I want to say here, so in this gray at the bottom, 26% of people can't use a computer, period. The yellow and the red part's about 43%, and they can send email, find an email, delete an email. And the green people, they can schedule a meeting using a meeting scheduling app. So the thing to remember is that you are definitely not your user, because those people in the strong level, we're not talking about writing code. We're just talking about being able to sort of use one or two different things at a time to use to get through their computer. So it's important to remember that you are not and never will, probably never will be, the user for whatever site you're working on. So UX is divided up into 5 areas. Let me see if I got this right. Usable, utility, functional integrity, persuasiveness, and visual design. Man, I made this up while you were talking, Stony. This is iconic ketchup bottle. That's UI, it's iconic. But when you're looking to put ketchup on your hamburger, if you use that iconic bottle, the juice comes out first and squirts all over the place, if you can even get the ketchup out of the bottle. So when they flipped it over and made it much more useful for people, it becomes usable. And that's what you're looking for when you're building a website. So we need to have usable, can you use it? And that means some things you can use, well, let me say it a different way. Some things you can use, but has no value. You know those boxes that sort of open and close and open and close and open and close, but they don't do anything? That's useful, but it doesn't have any value. So it's not what you want to be building your website for. Utility, excuse me. Utility is, can it work? Can you find what you're looking? Does it do something you want it to do? Do you have the tools to do? Can you find on the website the tools that you want to use to do the reason you got there in the first place? Wikipedia is a really good example of a particularly utility-based website. If you go to Wikipedia, you know what you're going to find. You're going to be able to search the subject matter. It doesn't look very nice, but it sure does make it easy to find what you're looking for. Then you got to pay attention to functional integrity. And that means, does it work? Will it crash? That would be bad. Do all the links work? Does it work the right way every time you want to use it? That's functional integrity. And is it persuasive? Persuasive, I was thinking that I would leave this off for marketing people to talk about, but then I was thinking about Amazon Prime Day, and I realized that Amazon in general, does persuasive really, really well. Excuse me. They have, every page shows the picture of the thing, some information from the manufacturer. There are reviews by people and stars with the reviews. And there are other pictures of things that people looked at before or after this thing that you're looking at, maybe some other suggestions, and heck, a bunch of stuff you didn't even know you needed, but sure might be interesting, and so you might want to look at that. So that's the first part. But then when you're looking at functional integrity on a I hate to say lesser site, but smaller site than Amazon, then you're looking at stuff like the authority of the links, the authority of the authors, the authority of the way the information is presented on the website. Is there enough content there to make people understand what you're talking about and convince people that what you were presenting is the right thing to do? Also, testimonials are really good for this. And testimonials, I have people who think all the testimonials go on one page. I have a client who has 437 lines testimonial letters. Don't do that. Put as a few on the right place, on the website, in a place where that information actually goes. And that's persuasiveness. Then then my site comes back. The part I didn't forget was visual design. This is the part that seems to get all the love. I'm not talking about scrolling here. I never go right and left, but make sure that the hero image isn't so big that it renders the content on the page invisible. If the hero image is so big, then you might not know how far they have to scroll down to get the next piece of information. You want to watch out for content overload. Make sure there's an appropriate contrast between the content, the words, and the background. I have some clients who are very concerned about making the site quiet so as not to disturb people while they're reading. A lot of clients with coaches work with people who have ADD, so they want things to be quiet. So we have a light gray background with a dark gray type on top. And it's really hard to see, especially if the light's not quite right. That's a problem. So client calm, that's important, but you got to be able to see the words. And I find a website called Check My Colors, that's COLOURS, is a great tool for checking the contrast of everything between your links, between your words, between everything. Then to remember, people have a really short attention span on the web. So use short paragraphs, short sentences, bullets, lists, and bold words. Make scanning easy. When I first started writing with my own website, which is about 1999, I had one of those phone calls where the guy said, "Oh, we can make you first on Google." Yeah, okay, just tell me what you're going to do. And so they told me some things, and essentially what it amounted to was to have a couple of bold words, some of the bold words being more like, I was an ADD coach in Baltimore, so it should say someplace in the content in bold, ADD coach in Baltimore. And I made a few bullet points and a few links, and I was #1 in Google for ADD coach in Baltimore for years after I wasn't even doing that anymore. So people want to be able to, they're not going to read it. It's not like, Mr. Milford in the 12th grade trying to have full paragraphs and good sentences. Just make it easy for people to be able to see, to scan what you're doing. Along with that goes the hierarchy of headings. You've got to have an H1. Well, in WordPress, default title of the page is the H1. Thou shalt be one and only one H1 on a page. Then you need to have an H2, and then an H3, and then you go any order you want after that. But you've got to have an H2 before an H3. I learned this from a Google partner that I did some business with a while ago. So I like to keep that straight. And that means that helps not only the search engines from figuring out what your site is about, but it also signals to visitors that this is a section and this is another section. And if I just want to get those pieces of information, I want to just get those pieces of information quickly. You got to choose the right size of the font for your text. 16 pixels seems to be the most common right now. Many sites use 20, and particularly if your site is old, if your audience is older, you might want to push that up a little. And then considering the content width. This really bugs me on a lot of WordPress themes that have full width text. It's really hard to read from one side of the screen all the way to the other and then go back. And did I pick that up in exactly the right place? I'm not sure. So newspapers have, what, 2.5 inches or something across? So you can read that pretty quick. So generally, there shouldn't be more than 50 to 75 characters on a line, about 750 pixels wide, which gives you plenty of extra white space around the content and allows people to sort of focus in on the piece of what it is that they're trying to read. Excuse me. Within the content at the top of the page, if you put an image in the beginning of your article that's in the content, not a what do you call featured image at the top, but something that's actually in the content, left or right, justified, it shortens up the width of those first few lines of your content, which lets people read that little first part faster and may get them connected to the story more quickly and be more invested in what they're reading. And speaking of the images, they shouldn't be too big, they shouldn't be too small. Not every image needs to have a link on it to a bigger picture. Just don't add extra code that you don't need to add. Using alt tags, which are important for SEO, for search engine optimization, and for people who use screen readers. So they should describe the image. You can certainly use some words that are keywords for your site, but they also should describe the image. So it's not a place, you don't want to shove a whole bunch of keywords in there. If it's a picture of keys, then it's a picture of keys, no matter what else you're using it for. But if the image is a link then the alt tag really should say what's going to happen when it's linked. I am a fan of, if a page is going to open a PDF, if a link will open a PDF, to use an icon for a PDF, and then in that icon say opens a PDF, or if it's going to open a Word document, or if it's going to open in a new page, use those sort of icons so that people know what's going to happen. People want to know what's going to happen next. They don't want to click on something that seems to imply they're going to have to buy something if they're just going to get a little bit more information first. And speaking of links, they need to be obvious and specific, not just by color, but they also need another visual marker. In the beginning, all links were blue and underlined, boom. And then time passed, they said, oh, wow, we can do more stuff with this. We can make them different colors, and we can make them bold. And then the underline kind of went away as sort of out. But the fact is, the people who have color blindness may not be able to see if it's a link or not a link. So we need that underlining, and we need something to happen when you hover over it or when you click on it. It needs to be obvious that something is happening. And also the notion of no more, we're not doing that anymore. Click here for more information. And even learn more has sort of fallen out of favor because it's not enough information. And people know if there are words that are underlined that's a link. So we don't necessarily have to say click here or we don't have to say click here to learn about cicadas. We could just say, how do cicadas get back in the ground, and make that a link, and people could click on that and understand that they were going to learn about cicadas, which we have many, many, many millions of here in the East Coast.
Kurt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a quick question that came in. If you could clarify something. I think I know the answer to this, but you referenced H1, H2, etc. Sally would like to know exactly what you meant by those H's.
Thank you. Good question. So those are heading tags, which how do I say this? If you're using WordPress starters, say, Sally, are you using WordPress? Can you ask her that? Does she know? Can you tell me? It doesn't matter. If you're using bold words as to sort of look like headings, back in the day when they used a typewriter, when you came to a certain place and you wanted it to be obvious that this was the next section of what you were writing about, you might use bold words. Now, there was nothing special about those words except they were darker than the other words. So that's one way to do it. But that doesn't indicate that might indicate to people this is a heading, but it doesn't indicate to search engines that this is more important, has a higher hierarchy than the other content. So H1 is a heading 1, the most important heading on the page, and there should only be one. And then an H2 generally is slightly smaller and perhaps a different color. Then an H3 is a little smaller than that, and H4 is a little smaller than that. And each one of those could have a different style. So an H1 might be all caps, and an H2 might be blue, and an H3 might be all lowercase, and an H4 might have different spacing between the letters. And while that indicates to people, what's happening, it's almost the fact that they're headings, that they're tagged as headings in the code, indicates to the search engines that this is important. This is where we're changing subjects. This is what's happening. I hope that makes some sense. If it doesn't, ask me again and I'll think of some other way to say it. So navigation is when we're talking about visual design, the navigation, the titles actually have an impact on the SEO. So choose those wisely. Don't make cute titles. Don't say talk to me, say contact. Make it clear. This is what I want. This is what I'm trying to do. And frankly, I believe that the contact link needs to be in the top navigation on every page. No burying it under about us or something else. Because if I want to contact you, I want it to be clear that that's where I go to find that contact information. And I think that that link to the contact also belongs in the footer in the sort of a quick link section that would include your address and phone number and licenses that you need to carry, that you need to have, and those sorts of things should go into the footer. You should be able to get to any page with no more than 3 clicks. So you got to think about how many levels that navigation block is going to have. If you click on some sites have those giant, big menus that is like 12 or 14 different things, and each one with 5 or 6 drops down, and it covers up a whole bunch of content at the top of the page. I have a real problem with that being a useful use of the space on any given page. And can I tell you how totally annoying those sites are when you have to fill out a box that says who you are before you can even look at the content? I think that's ridiculous. That is bad. What about breadcrumbs? Breadcrumbs are great for navigation on the site, and as long as you use parent-child relationship between content. So this is the top level says about us, and under that is your board list, and under your board list and your bylaws and whatever. And if those bottom pages are children of about us, then the breadcrumbs, which are at the top of a given page in little tiny papers, words they'll be like, and say home, and then an arrow, and then about, and then an arrow, and then board, or whatever the other pages are that show below that. Those are great, especially if you have a complicated collection of content. But if you don't use that sort of hierarchy in your page naming, it might not be that great. The other thing to also makes your user experience better is an on-page anchor navigation, like a table of contents. If you have a long site, a page with a lot of content, so there's sort of you click to like a table of contents in a book with links that go down further on the page, and then with that also include a back to the top, so you can I could get down that far, and then I don't have to scroll back up to get to the other, get to the different content. And finally, the elements have to be where they belong. The search should be at the top of the page. The follow links, the social follow links belong at the top of the page. And by the way, they should work. I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth a little. If you're check your social links. If you have a link to Facebook because you have a Facebook page, but you don't actually ever put anything on it, then don't include a link to Facebook to follow you. The same thing for LinkedIn. If you never look at LinkedIn, what's the use of a LinkedIn follow link at the top? And Google Plus doesn't exist anymore. Put a follow share, a button that says share this information on social media. That belongs at the bottom of the page because why would you share it if you hadn't read it first? Excuse me. The sidebar is a place to include stuff like your subscription box and popular content and recent posts and categories. And you can put another search bar there too, and the owner's picture could go there. Something that would be useful to that thing. It occurs to me that one of the things I wanted to say before is on the about page, put the owner's picture there. I want to know if this is a plumber's site, I want to be able to see that guy, presumably that plumber, and know what he looks like. So if he shows up at my house, I know it's him. And I want to know that he looks like somebody I'd like to have in my house. If it's a coach or a therapist, I want to know that person doesn't have a third eye. I want that person to look, the picture of the person to look like he's looking at me, like he's speaking to me. And I think that is a really big piece of making a person feel comfortable on your website. At the footer goes obviously at the bottom of the page, but it has some really necessary information in it. Physical location, which helps visitors and search engines serve your content to people in appropriate areas. And if you don't include some geographic location, if it's the state that you're in, Google will use your phone number to plant you on the map. And if you have a cell phone that says you live in Connecticut, but you're really in Texas, that's not particularly helpful. And if you only have an 800 number, that's really not helpful. So you want some sort of physical location at the bottom of the page. And that probably should not be a post office box, in my opinion. Down there, you'd also have any license numbers that you have to have. Link to the contact page, even though you have it at the top, you put it at the bottom. An HTML sitemap to help visitors find what might not be obvious. So if you did have that contact form under your about page, and I'm looking for it and I don't see it, and doesn't occur to me to push the about page, then I might look at the sitemap to see where that would show up. Also down there.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but we've got 5 minutes left until a hard stop. Would you like to transition to some Q&A, or is there anything else specifically you'd like to cover? Would you like to transition to a Q&A? And Tony, it looks like you're back as well.
Can I just say this one other thing? In the end of the slides, I'll post the slides in a little bit, but at least it has all the links to all the sites that I referenced in the talk, so you can probably look through and find some other useful stuff, and that's all.
And we'll be certain to post this link along with the on-demand recorded video of this session, so that folks who are here, I'm sure there's lots of great content within both decks that you guys would like to examine again. So you will have access to that
Cool.
when we post in about 48 hours.
Okay, cool. So you're going to ask questions now? Is that true?
Actually, I'm asking the audience, does anyone have any questions here in the last 5 minutes that we've got? Any specifics? Please don't be shy. I've got one for you, and it's really one that I kind of learned the hard way. Do you believe that the most important bit of advice you can get when you're doing your first website is really in the design of your customer experience? I think we all kind of have our own subjective and creative ideas on, should the color be purple, should the photo be big, should the headline be here, where should it be? But really where people seem to struggle, I certainly know I struggled in my first website, to really create the right kind of customer experience. So wow. Is that a really important consideration, I guess is the question.
I think so, and I think part of that is in the notion of talking to people who would use the site. So it comes under the heading of research. What is my site about? What do I want people to do when they get there? Who do I want to come to the site? Who do I want to have something to say? And it's the research part. I think that when people start to decide by themselves what they're going to do, like I said, you are not the audience. You are not the user for your website. You know too much about the content. You know too much about how it was built, and people will just they won't be able to find what you can find. If you built it, man, I know where everything is and how to change it and all that. But if I ask you, can you find such and such a piece of information? You don't know what's there. So you really have, and I guess it comes also to sort of a wireframe thing. And I don't mean a necessarily fancy one, but a piece of paper and draw a picture. This is what I think is going to happen. This is where I think this is going to be, and that's going to be, and show it to some people and say, does this make sense? And then,
That's
you
great.
know, then,
Tony, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing, honestly, is the messaging, because that's what's going to really get them into that experience, and it's going to, you know, depending on where that experience starts. I think it starts with messaging, and making sure you're communicating the value and all the right things that the customer needs to hear.
Felicia has a question. What do we focus on for a new website for a new company? So new. Should the site have a grand opening? Can I have images only website? What do you suggest? Tony, you can go first.
I would say a small informational website. Yeah, I think images are important, you know, but you have to have some information there that is going to resonate with people. You know, and again, that is the beginning of your messaging. It doesn't have to be a 50-page website. It can be a 3-page website, homepage. Here's our product services. Here's how you contact us. But, you know, you should have some very strong messaging on that.
yeah, I think I agree with you, Stoney. The content is really the most important thing. And the messages and no coming soon. Don't do that. But the content, I mean, people call me for a new website and we'll talk all day about what they want it to look like and how they want it to work. And then I say, and do you have any content? And they go, oh, no. Call me back.
So we have time for one last question, quick question, and it's really basically the budget question. You know, it's like, where do you put the decimal point? What kind of budgets should one allow for to have a professional do a website?
You can do that, Tony.
You know, I paid somebody to do my personal website, and I paid him $300. And it's not that I couldn't do it. I fiddled around with it enough to go, I just don't want to. And somebody said, I'll do it for $300, and I said, sold.
And I bet you had written the content before he started.
Yeah, I was responsible for all the content.
Right.
Exactly. Well, guys, we really appreciate you doing this. And audience, thank you so much for coming. If you're sticking around for the next session, you don't need to do anything. Just stay where you are, and we'll be rolling into that next session. Thanks very much for coming. As I said, we'll be providing a recording of this session on demand for free sometime in the next 48 hours when we post it on our site. So again, thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate you being here. Thanks, Kirch, and thanks, Stoney.